I'd like to take a trip now back in time and meet some pretty cool characters. They were the misfits of their generation and have since been called the desert fathers and mothers of the 4th century.
St. Anthony was seen as the forerunner and father of monasticism after moving to live in the desert in about 270 AD. Thousands of men and women had moved into the desert by the time of Antony's death in 356 AD, which had by then become more of a city.
What we need to remember at this point is that this is our Christian heritage and had major influence on the development of early Christianity and significantly on the Irish Celtic Church, and this became one of its founding stories alongside Johannine theology. And together these two streams form what we've come to know as the Irish Celtic monastic church.
It's interesting to note that many Christians left the city for the desert after Emperor Constantine I had passed an edict that made Christianity an acceptable religion within the empire. Prior to this had been fierce persecution under Emperor Diocletian in 303 AD. So when life could have been free of death threats and isolation, they felt the call to go down into the desert, into the unknown, and learn from the men and women living out their lives in this hostile environment. St. Anthony's own call had been in response to Matthew 19:21, to follow Christ fully and give away his possessions. His call was to be a hermit, and his solitary obedience set the whole Roman Empire afire with monastic vocations. People either lived close to the hermits to learn from them or in groups, the areas most populated by monastics at this time being Lower Egypt by hermits following Antony's example, Upper Egypt in Cenobitic communities of men and women under Abba Pacamius, and the third type was a semi-heremitic lifestyle, mostly west of the Nile in a place called Skeet, begun by Saint Amun. The latter were small groups of 2 to 6 people, men and women with a common spiritual elder, and were responsible for most of the sayings that have come down the centuries and are known as the Desert Father sayings.
Work was an integral part of their life, and it was work done with their own hands. Prayer and penance were central to their lives, but in order to live, they needed food.
One funny desert saying captures this completely. Abba John the dwarf said to his elder brother, "I want to live in the same security as the angels, doing no work but serving God without intermission," and off he went. A week later he returned, knocking on the door. His brother answered, "Who are you?" He said, "John." The brother answered, "John has become an angel and is no longer among men," said the brother, and kept him waiting. John kept knocking. Finally his brother opened and said, "If you are a man, you are going to have to start working again in order to live. If you are an angel, why come into a cell?" So John did penance. "Forgive me, brother, for I have sinned."
The fathers and mothers were humble men and women with not a lot to say. They were never unclear or mystical in their words, and their application was always to real situations and jobs done in the 4th century desert. They would often have little to say about God because they found that after long and hard praying, silence made a lot more sense than a lot of words. These desert dwellers insisted on being human and ordinary, for to be anything else would have been a complete contradiction to their vocation and their very existence. They realized early in the desert that they were helpless to help other people unless they'd found some solid ground in God, face themselves. Then things could change.
It was Abba Moses who said to a brother seeking a good word, "Go, sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." The challenge for these desert folk was always for them to change. Gentle Abba Moses, who had been asked to come and judge the sins of a brother, walked into a gathered group of brothers with a basket full of holes and sand running out, which was tied to his back, and said, "My own sins are running out like sand, and yet I've come to judge the sins of another." Abba John said, We have thrown down a light burden, which is the reprehending of our own selves, and we have chosen instead to bear a heavy burden, by justifying our own selves and condemning others.
Because of this vigorous self-examination, they drew up a list of the main passions that we encounter on our journey to the Kingdom's Manifesto expressed in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. Examples of these would be murder, lust, envy, anger, gluttony, etc.
For someone who talked too much, the remedy was simple. You put a stone in your mouth, as did Agatha, for 3 years until he learnt to be silent.
They also developed an understanding of the inner world of the spirit and passed on their discovery of logosmoi, or should we say distracting thoughts. And these are thoughts that actually keep us from our vocation. And I'm sure living down in the desert, having to think about food, health, what we're going to drink, where we're going to live, would have been major preoccupations.
One of the sayings identifies this clearly is a brother who came to an elder asking if it was okay to keep 2 pence in case he got sick. The elder, realizing his thinking, said, "Keep the money." However, the monk, unsure of the elder's response, asked again, at which the elder replied, "It's not good to keep the money, as it represents your hope, and would not God care for him? Therefore cast your care upon the Lord."
Love and hospitality was the DNA of desert life. It was actually considered to be more of value than fasting or any personal ascetics. The love that they found in this bleakest of places was the spiritual life. And any action devoid of this love was considered to be an illusion. They were enemies of any subtle way in which a brother sought to bully another brother he considered to be inferior to himself. The Desert Fathers' sayings or prescriptions that were practiced and passed on to future generations were always short and simple and straight to the point. They were practical answers to practical questions, and they helped individuals to overcome the inner conflict within the human condition. One story tells of a brother called Abba John the Dwarf, who boasted to one of the elders that he'd overcome all temptations. And this shrewd elder turned round and said, "You need to pray to God for more battles to make your life worth something."
John Cassian, a monk and theologian who spent time in the desert speaking with the elders and learning of their lifestyle, was a major player in passing on their thinking and practical living to the Western Church. Cassian is credited for 2 major spiritual works, the Institutes and the Conferences, in which he committed to paper the wisdom of the Desert Fathers. The establishment of a monastery in Marseille and a monastery on the island of Lerin, close to the coast of Marseille, were directly influenced by these writings.
Such was the potency of this insight into human nature that St. Benedict in his rule incorporated the words of the Fathers to be read out frequently before the Compline prayers. By this time, they'd become traditional monastic law. Our challenge today must surely be to catch again the fire that arrested these early pioneers and that set ablaze the birth and emergence of the Celtic monastic church. We need to step out again into the desert of the unknown and establish the kingdom of God in our time.